guys, it's Tofu, and if you've been following me on Twitter, which there's a good chance that's where most of you came from, and if you found this video some other way, follow me on Twitter. Anyways, if you've seen my Twitter, you probably know that I love Banjo and Kazooie a lot. I meme about them, I draw art of them, and just tweet about them a lot in general. I've talked a bit about how I consider Banjo and Kazooie to be my heroes, so today I wanted to make this video to go into a bit more detail about that. So without further ado, let me tell you a story about Banjo, Kazooie, and me. I like to consider myself a fairly early adopter of YouTube. I don't remember the exact year I started watching YouTube videos a lot, but it was definitely way before the concept of a YouTuber was mainstream. I would come home from school, fire up my old Windows 2000 laptop, and watch Let's Plays of Nintendo games for hours, sometimes even staying up late to watch them. Maybe that's why I'm so numb to my sleep schedule getting messed up nowadays. Even if that is the case, I hardly regret my days of watching LPs until the sun went down. I would watch videos about games I loved, games I was struggling with, or games I had never even heard of before. That was the magical thing about the internet. There are so many dedicated fans sharing everything they know about games that some people wouldn't even know otherwise. Obviously, the internet is still like this, but you have to keep in mind this was like 2010 or so. I know this was hardly the internet's earliest phases, but still, the internet was drastically different 10 years ago compared to how it is now. We laughed at memes like this back then, and now we laugh at memes like... Alright, well... maybe it isn't so different. But seriously, knowing that there was this massive digital library of information on video games was crazy for a kid back then. I remember constantly browsing the trivia sections of random Mario wiki pages just because I thought it was so darn interesting. So where am I going with all of this? Well, basically, if you were into Nintendo stuff on the internet, it was only a matter of time before you found out about a certain 2 words, 5 syllables, and 12 letters. Or 13 characters if you want to include the hyphen. I support you, bro. You will be included. I'm talking about Banjo Kazooie, the classic collectathon on the Nintendo 64 with the best darn tootin' bear and bird duo the world had ever seen. There were tons of Let's Plays for this game, probably because LPs back then were mostly actual walkthroughs rather than the variety of them that there are today. And oh boy, was the collectathon the perfect genre for a walkthrough. I don't remember exactly what channel first introduced me to Banjo Kazooie, but I'm pretty sure it was either Nintendo Capri Sun or Josh Jepson. So, thanks guys. Now the history of Banjo Kazooie is fairly common knowledge at this point, but just in case anybody's unaware, here's a brief recap of how the Bear and Bird came to be. Rare was a video game company in the 90s who had struck gold with their recently released Donkey Kong Country, and they had started developing a pirate-themed RPG for the Super Nintendo codenamed Project Dream. However, with the SNES in its final years, the team decided to shift development to the Nintendo 64, where it became clear that an action-adventure platformer would be much better suited for the kind of game Rare was going for. The same was true for the game's protagonist, going from a boy named Edson to Banjo the Bear, with Kazooie added later. Banjo Kazooie was released in 1998 to critical acclaim, holding the 10th place spot for the best-selling N64 games of all time. 2 years later, a sequel was released titled Banjo Tooie, with a third game being teased at the end of that game. Unfortunately, Rare was in a bit of a tight spot after that. They were struggling financially and Nintendo just wasn't supporting them enough anymore. Enter Microsoft, who purchased Rare in its entirety for over 300 million smackarooskies. From there on out, Rare made games exclusively on Xbox consoles with poor to average reception. Finally, in 2008, Rare released another Banjo-Kazooie game on the Xbox 360, though it wasn't exactly what fans had been waiting for all these years. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is a game where you complete missions using vehicles that you build yourself. A fine concept on its own, but one that strayed away from the original platforming collectathon style. Fans were not happy about this, and they still aren't. But the general consensus of Nuts and Bolts nowadays is that it's a good game, just not a good Banjo-Kazooie game. I don't own an Xbox system myself, so I've never actually played Nuts and Bolts, but I really would like to give it a fair try one day. What I can say though is that the character redesigns are hideous, but that's something most people would agree on. Another thing that Nuts and Bolts is criticized for is its fourth wall-breaking dialogue. The Banjo-Kazooie series is no stranger to fourth wall breaks, but before they were always just done as jokes. In this game, though, the story practically revolves around them, and they're executed in a way that almost comes off as mocking to the player. Long story short, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was not a success, and the Bear and Bird never got another game again. In fact, their last appearance in any game was as playable characters in the Xbox 360 version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Until... Wait. This video's about Banjo Kazooie and me. I'll get to the elephant in the room later, but let's get back to my story first. When I was 11 years old, my family and I went to the Crayola factory at one point during our summer vacation. The Crayola factory is basically a giant building of artsy-related activities for kids, and one of them had you use fabric markers on a white teddy bear so you could give it your own design. This was when I was really into watching Banjo Kazooie Let's Plays, so I made my bear look like Banjo. I still snuggle with him to this day, and even though the upcoming Banjo and Kazooie plushies from Fangamer will probably make this one obsolete, it'll still hold a special place in my heart. After we were done at the Crayola factory, we came across an old video game store, and wouldn't you know it, they had a Nintendo 64 for sale and a Banjo Kazooie cartridge. I couldn't usually get games unless I had money saved up, otherwise I would just have to wait until Christmas or my birthday, which is also in December. So I didn't really expect to walk out of the store with a copy of Banjo Kazooie, especially since I would need to get the N64 too. But I think my mom realized how happy it would make me, so she ended up buying both of them for me. I had to wait until we got home to play it, but once I did... Oh man, once I did... Actually, I don't remember my first playthrough of Banjo Kazooie very well. I mean, I had seen the entire game online already, so it's not like it was anything new. But still, getting to actually play it myself felt so magical. And soon enough, I had 100%ed Banjo Kazooie for my very first time. Then a year or so later, I decided to play it again. And it was fun, but I couldn't stop thinking about how badly I wanted to play the sequel, Banjo Tooie. So I put it on my Christmas list, and sure enough, there was a Banjo Tooie cartridge waiting for me under the tree on Christmas morning. Currently, Banjo Tooie is my favorite game of all time, but back then, I didn't really like it that much. I mean, I liked it, but I just liked the original game so much more. Banjo Tooie was way bigger and way more confusing, and I was just a dumb, stupid kid. I grew up with Let's Plays, so I didn't have a problem looking stuff up, but the game was still really hard for me, and when I finally 100%ed everything, I felt more relieved than satisfied. After that, I pretty much just went back to playing the original Banjo Kazooie again. I was really into figuring out the quickest and most efficient routes to collect everything in each world. I guess you could say I was speedrunning, but I never really did it in one sitting. Plus, I was still a dumb, stupid kid, so my routes aren't anywhere near as good as an actual speedrunner's. My current best time according to the in-game timer is 4 hours and 26 minutes, which is almost 2.5 hours off the world record. But still, it's not too bad for what's comparatively a casual playthrough that doesn't use any glitches. After a few years of playing Banjo Kazooie once every month or two, I got the urge to play Banjo Tooie again. This time, I started to appreciate the good things about Tooie more than the bad, and I really wanted to play it again after I had finished it. Unfortunately, school was starting soon, and Banjo Tooie needs a lot of commitment for a full playthrough. But I promised myself that the next summer, I would get as good at Banjo Tooie as I was with the first game. Summer 2018 was a very dark time of my life. It felt like my family relationships were crumbling all around me, and I blamed myself for it. My anxiety was at an all-time high, and I was showing definite signs of depression. I was either sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. I barely had any motivation to draw or play games, two of my favorite things in the world. I spent a lot of time just laying down in the darkness of my room, as negative thoughts consumed me. I didn't know how to deal with depression, and I was too scared to talk to anyone about it, so I just hid from everyone and hardly did anything. There was one thing I had consistent motivation for, though, and that was playing Banjo Tooie. I don't really know why, but I guess I felt obligated to fulfill the promise I made to myself at the end of the summer last year. So I started playing Banjo Tooie a lot. I would do one world, restart the file, do the world again, and then the next world. Rinse and repeat until I had everything I needed to know about how to complete the game as efficiently as possible ingrained into my dumb, stupid noggin. I probably 100%ed Banjo Tooie at least 5 or 6 times that summer alone, and thank goodness I did. When I play Banjo Kazooie or Tooie, everything is second nature to me, so it's not like I have to focus or think a lot while I'm playing, but at the same time, all of my other thoughts cease too. It's a weird, magical feeling that I'm not quite sure how to explain, but it's almost like I'm on a different plane of existence entirely. It's scary to think about, but I often wonder what I would have done if Banjo Tooie wasn't there for me. I had a lot of dark thoughts back then, and was really struggling to find a reason to keep existing. It's something I still struggle with sometimes too, but I think I'm slowly getting better. Anyways, it's just a gut feeling I have, but I really feel like without Banjo Tooie there to distract me, it would have been a lot easier to give into those dark thoughts. I honestly believe that Banjo Tooie saved my life. The next summer, I graduated high school, and a few days into the summer, I was back at the high school to get on a bus to go on a band trip to New Orleans. None of my friends were going on this trip, so I wasn't really looking forward to it, but it was already paid for, so I'd feel bad if I didn't go. The bus ride took up pretty much an entire day, and even though I was crammed into a big vehicle with a bunch of sweaty teenagers, I did have a seat all to myself, along with my Switch, 3DS, a blanket, and the banjo plushie from the Crayola factory that I mentioned earlier. So it wasn't that bad. But when we actually got to New Orleans, an intense feeling of dread rushed through my entire body, and I couldn't figure out why. Was it because I was going to have to stay in a hotel room with 3 other people I barely knew? I mean, yeah, that's not ideal, and social situations like that are terrifying to me, but they've never made me feel this bad before. For dinner that day, we went to the Hard Rock Cafe, and as I was eating, I realized what was so upsetting to me. For the past few months, my grandpa, who I called Papa, had been in the hospital. Shortly before I left for New Orleans, Papa came home from the hospital. They brought a hospital bed into the house and had a nurse come check on him every day. At first, I thought that was good news. I thought he was getting better. But as I was sitting in the Hard Rock Cafe, 1,000 miles away from him, I realized that it was the exact opposite. I hid into a bathroom stall and just started crying my eyes out. I was very close to Papa, and now I was terrified that I would never see him again, that he would be gone before I even came home from New Orleans. I texted my mom and told her how I was feeling, and she asked if I wanted to fly home. That seemed impossible to me, but luckily my dad is the band director at my high school, so he was actually on the trip with me, and with his help along with everyone else back home, I was actually able to get a flight home the very next day. My relationship with my family is not as good as it could be, to say the least, but I'm extremely grateful that everyone was able to work together to get me to come home early. I'm telling you all of this for a reason, by the way. The day I flew home was June 11th, 2019, a day that I will never, ever forget. After my mom and sister picked me up from the airport, I turned on my phone and immediately pulled up Nintendo's E3 2019 Direct. I cried. As soon as the Jiggy bounced across the screen, I froze. I couldn't believe it. I still don't believe it. I started to cry tears of joy, which of course led to my sister and mom wondering what was going on. I paused the video on the splash screen and showed my sister. Thankfully, she understood what was going on, and tried to explain it to my mom as I continued to cry at the reveal trailer. My heroes were back, and I was the happiest I had been in a very long time. Sadly, 2 days later, Papa passed away, though I was just glad I was able to see him beforehand. And yeah, I was sad of course, but for the most part, I was okay. And again, it's just another gut feeling I have, but I feel like Banjo and Kazooie really helped to make me feel as okay as possible. Seriously, I rewatched that trailer several times every day, and always smiled like a dumb, stupid idiot every single time. It was just so surreal seeing these almost forgotten characters finally back on a Nintendo console. I said it already, but I really can't stress enough that this was the happiest I had been in well over a year. Once again, Banjo and Kazooie were there for me when I needed them most. From Banjo Kazooie providing me immense enjoyment for several years, Banjo Tooie practically saving my life, and the duo's inclusion in Smash Bros. Helping me through a very difficult time, I think you can see why I consider Banjo and Kazooie to be my heroes, which leads me into why I wanted to make this video in the first place. For a long time on the internet, it was seen as weird or cringy to find such comfort in fictional characters. People probably thought that someone had to be really detached from reality to find such enjoyment in a world of fantasy, and rather than trying to help or understand them, they'd rather just belittle them for something that makes them happy. But the times are changing, and I really just want to let everyone know that finding comfort in anything, even if you or someone else thinks it's silly, is extremely valid. Got some characters that make you feel better just by thinking about them? That's valid. Have a game that you play through over and over again because it makes you happy? That's valid. Do you snuggle with stuffed animals at night to feel less lonely? That's valid. Is there a character that you love so much, and even though you're aware and are okay with the fact that they're not real and never will be, you still like to imagine that they're there with you, holding your hand, keeping you safe, and giving you a soft, gentle kiss on your forehead? Don't be embarrassed about that. It's valid. As long as it's not harmful to you or anybody else, whatever coping mechanism you find comfort in is valid. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. You don't have to do this or anything, but I strongly recommend letting the world know that you love something. Whether it's through tweeting about it, talking to someone about it, or making a video explaining your love for it. Wait a minute. Do it. Put that positive energy out there for everyone to see. The world could use some more of it anyways. And not only will it make you feel better, but it could also inspire someone else to do the same thing. I guess that's kind of what I'm hoping to do here. Thank you for watching, and always remember, you are valid. Oh, and before I end this video off, there's something else I'd like to say. To Steve and Greg Males, Grant Kirkhope, Chris Sutherland, Masahiro Sakurai, and anybody else who has been involved with anything officially related to Banjo Kazooie, yes, even that, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. It's easy for me to just credit Banjo and Kazooie as a large source of my happiness, but obviously, they wouldn't be able to make me as happy as they do without all of your hard work over the years. So again, I thank you for everything you've done for the Bear and Bird, and everything you may continue to do for them in the future. There's nothing confirmed at the moment, but the Banjo Kazooie series is more than overdue for a new game, or at least a remake of some kind. If you had asked me if I thought it was going to happen a year or so ago, I probably would have told you that I was starting to lose hope. But now, I can feel it in my heart that a new game will happen. It's that same hope that's kept me going all these years before, and look where that eventually got us. We might not get even confirmation of a new game's development for another year, or 2, or 10, but I've waited long enough before, and I'm not about to give up anytime soon. I know my heroes will return again someday, and if you don't believe me, well, in the words of Gruntilda herself, just you wait until Banjo 3.